gametes are non-motile, and they have to be brought together for the process of fertilization. And pollination is a process to achieve this objective. So students, in this module, we will discuss about pollination and kinds of pollination, and along with this, we will also discuss about the agents of pollination. Now here comes the obvious question, that what is pollination? Yes, the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the pistil is termed as pollination. Now let us look at the kinds of pollination. Depending on the source of pollen, pollination can be divided into three types: autogamy, geitonogamy, xenogamy. Now let us discuss these one by one. First, let us discuss about autogamy. In this type, pollination is achieved within the same flower. Pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. In a normal flower, which opens and exposes the anthers and the stigma, complete autogamy is rather rare. Autogamy in such flowers requires synchrony in pollen release and stigma receptivity, and also the anthers and the stigma should lie close to each other so that self-pollination can occur. Here, let me tell you something interesting. Some plants such as viola, common pansy, oxalis, and camelina produce two types of flowers that are chesmogamous flowers, which have exposed anthers and stigma, and cleistogamous flowers, which do not open at all. In such flowers, the anthers and stigma lie close to each other. When anthers dehisce in the flower buds, pollen grains come in contact with the stigma to bring about pollination. Thus, cleistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous, as there is no chance of cross-pollen landing on the stigma. Cleistogamous flowers produce a short seed set, even in the absence of pollinators. Now you might be thinking about this term pollinators, right? Well, pollinators are animals which move the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma and helps in the process of fertilization of the ovules. For example, small birds, bees, butterflies, beetles, etc. are pollinators. Here, I have a question for you all. Do you think that cleistogamy is advantageous or disadvantageous to the plant? Well, cleistogamy has a share of both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage of cleistogamy is that the plant can propagate itself under unfavorable conditions. And as discussed earlier, cleistogamous flowers produce a short seed set, even in the absence of pollinators. On the other hand, the disadvantage is that there is self-pollination, which reduces the chance of variation and evolution of genetically superior plants. Now, let us discuss about geitonogamy. In geitonogamy, the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. Yes, we guessed it right. Geitonogamy is functionally cross-pollination, involving a pollinating agent. And genetically, it is similar to autogamy, since the pollen grains come from the same plant. And lastly, we have xenogamy. In xenogamy, the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of a different plant. This is the only type of pollination which during pollination brings genetically different types of pollen grains to the stigma. Now, let us move on to the next topic of this module, that is, agents of pollination. Plants use both abiotic and biotic components as agents for the process of pollination. Abiotic components include wind and water, and biotic components include animals. Majority of plants use biotic agents for pollination. Only a small proportion of plants use abiotic agents. Let us begin with pollination by wind. Pollination by wind is more common amongst abiotic pollinations. Here are some requirements which are to be fulfilled for the process of pollination by wind. Number 1. Pollen grains should be light and non-sticky so that they can be transported by wind currents. Number 2. The flowers must possess well-exposed stamens so that the pollens are easily dispersed into wind currents, and large, often feathery stigma to easily trap airborne pollen grains. Wind-pollinated flowers often have a single ovule in each ovary and numerous flowers packed into an inflorescence. A familiar example is the corn cob. The tassels on it are nothing but the stigma and the style, which wave in the wind to trap pollen grains. Along with this, wind pollination is quite common in grasses. Maybe that's why we find grasses in open places. Next up, we have pollination by water. Pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plants and is limited to about 30 genera, mostly monocotyledons. Can you recall, where is water a popular medium for fertilization? Yes, you're right. In algae, bryophytes, and pteridophytes, water is a must for fertilization to happen. Anyways, let's come back to this session. Some examples of water-pollinated plants are Vallisneria and Hydrilla, which grow in fresh water, and several marine sea grasses, such as Zostera. Well, it would surprise you to know that not all aquatic plants use water for pollination. In a majority of aquatic plants, such as water hyacinth and water lily, the flowers emerge above the level of water and are pollinated by insects or wind, as in most of the land plants. So, how does this process of pollination by water happen? Well, to understand this, let us take the example of Vallisneria. In Vallisneria, the female flower reaches the surface of water by a long stalk, and the male flowers of pollen grains are released onto the surface of water. They are carried passively by water currents, and some of them eventually reach the female flowers and the stigma and achieve pollination. Now let us take another example in sea grasses. The female flowers remain submerged in water and the pollen grains are released inside the water. Pollen grains in many such species are long, ribbon-like, and they are carried passively inside the water. Some of them reach the stigma and achieve pollination. Did you know that in most of the water-pollinated species, pollen grains are protected from wetting by a mucilaginous covering? Now let us discuss the pollination by animals. Majority of flowering plants use a range of animals as pollinating agents. Bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, birds, sunbirds and hummingbirds, and bats are the common pollinating agents. And as discussed earlier, these pollinating agents are termed as, yes, they're termed as pollinators. Among the animals, insects, particularly bees, are the dominant biotic pollinating agents. Pollination is also brought about by larger animals, such as some primates, lemurs, arboreal tree-dwelling rodents, or even reptiles, gecko lizard, and garden lizard. Now here's a fun fact for you. The world's largest known pollinator is the black and white ruffed lemur. They open the flowers of the traveler's palm with their fingers and push their long snouts onto the opened flowers to get that sweet nectar. When they do that, the flower's pollen coats their fur. The lemur then transports the pollen to other flowers and fertilizes them. Isn't that amazing? How smartly everything is connected? Majority of insect-pollinated flowers are large, colorful, fragrant, and rich in nectar. And what could be the reason behind it? Think about it. Yes, animals are attracted to flowers by color and fragrance. The flowers pollinated by flies and beetles secrete foul odor to attract these animals. But don't you think they do this for free? Do you? Nectar and protein-rich pollens are usually floral rewards to sustain these animal visits. When the animal comes in contact with the anthers and the stigma, the body of the animal gets a coating of pollen grains, because pollen grains are generally sticky in animal pollinated flowers. When the animal carrying pollen on its body comes in contact with the stigma, it brings about pollination. But these pollinators have their own tantrums as well. For instance, butterflies prefer flowers with flat petals that act like a landing strip for them to sit on. But given the fact that 1 in every 3 bites of food depends on pollinators, it's worth it, isn't it?